Let's jump right in. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a fascinating, honestly, kind of paradoxical phenomenon in the world of enterprise software. Picture this. A company spends millions of dollars and literally countless development hours building massive, custom SAP add-ons. And what's the goal? To chase down a discrepancy of 3 yen. Yeah, 3 yen. Sounds completely crazy, right? But believe it or not, it happens all the time. Teams build these huge extensions just to suppress intermediate rounding and force standard software to act exactly like their old legacy systems. So, in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why this happens and what it really costs in the long run.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our agenda for today. First, we have the trap of legacy replication. Second, diagnosing differences. Third, why add-ons remain. Fourth, decision documentation debt. And finally, number 5, clean core principles.
Section 1. The Trap of Legacy Replication. The 3N Mystery.
So, whenever massive SAP ERP migrations happen, teams inevitably face this universal super high-pressure headache. Here's the core detective mystery we're trying to solve today. Why do massive corporations, filled with incredibly smart people, spend small fortunes building complex custom add-ons? And we're not talking about simple tweaks here. These are highly specific algorithms built literally just to manipulate fraction destinations and suppress intermediate rounding during multi-step allocations. I mean, why go through all that trouble for what is essentially pocket change?
Well, the answer almost always stems from one specific sentence. Please give us the exact same numbers as the old system. If you've ever worked in IT or finance, you're probably cringing a little bit right now because you know exactly how this feels. It's this classic, incredibly rigid business demand, usually coming straight from the accounting department. They want continuity, right? They need to explain year-over-year margins to the board. And that totally understandable demand, it often forces some incredibly flawed architectural decisions.
Moving on to Section 2, Rounding Difference versus Model Difference, Diagnosing the Discrepancy.
So, where do these multi-million yen discrepancies actually come from? Well, spoiler alert, it is rarely just the rounding. Understanding the difference between these two concepts perfectly illustrates the heart of the technical confusion. On one side, you have rounding differences. These are tiny, local, and based entirely on decimals. It's simply a matter of when a fraction is rounded and where the leftover pennies end up. But then on the other side, you have model differences. These are structural, massive, business logic-based differences that fundamentally alter where your costs actually flow.
Let's look at some examples of those massive model differences to put things in perspective. For instance, think about changing your statistical key figures. Say you decide to allocate IT costs by the number of PCs instead of the total number of employees. That changes your entire financial picture. The exact same goes for things like segment execution order or how actual activity prices are calculated, even material ledger allocations. So, hunting down rounding differences, it's a total red herring. The massive discrepancies that actually impact business decisions come from these structural underlying model differences.
Section 3. Why add-ons remain. The psychology of a flawed project.
Now, what's really interesting here is, if the large, impactful discrepancies are actually model-based, why do these rounding add-ons become permanent fixtures in the system? It's fascinating how this why breaks down into 2 distinct layers: triggers and enablers. Triggers are those temporary project pressures, things like user acceptance testing or UAT, and parallel runs where the old and new systems get compared side by side. Those are completely normal. But the enablers? That's the systemic and sometimes pretty toxic culture of as-is preservation. It's an environment where questioning the legacy process is just not done.
Think of this as the Trojan horse of ERP design. A project team scrambles to build a quick add-on to force the numbers to match during UAT, mostly just to get the system approved and move on. But because of that enabler culture that just assumes the old way was perfect, nobody ever stops to ask why the SAP standard wasn't used in the first place. So that temporary fix sneaks right into the permanent architecture, and suddenly, boom, you're stuck maintaining it for the next 20 years. Section 4. The real villain. Decision documentation debt. So the crucial point is, the true cost of these custom ERP add-ons isn't actually the complexity of the code itself. The real villain here is a brand new definition of technical debt: decision documentation debt. Over the long lifespan of an ERP system, the ultimate crime isn't writing a clunky or ugly piece of ABAP code. The ultimate crime is forgetting the design rationale.
It's the missing record of why a specific architectural design was chosen, and crucially, when it was actually supposed to be retired.
Specifically, there are 3 critical pieces of missing documentation that create this debt. Why wasn't the SAP standard used? Why did we absolutely need to replicate the legacy system? And, most importantly, what is the exact condition that triggers the abolition of this add-on? When these 3 records go missing, it causes absolute chaos. I mean, we're talking massive investigation costs years later, especially when a company tries to migrate to S/4HANA, and nobody has a clue what this custom code actually does, or if they even still need it.
Section 5. Clean Core Design Principles. A framework for the S/4HANA era.
Let's move forward and see how this builds into a real solution. Clean Core actually provides an actionable, concrete procedure for handling discrepancies in your next SAP project. Step 1. Rigorously analyze the discrepancies. Step 2. Classify them. Is it a tiny rounding difference or a massive model difference? Step 3. If you absolutely must replicate the legacy system for a parallel run, allow it, but temporarily. And finally, Step 4. Define the exact sunset conditions right then and there. Literally put an expiration date on it.
To truly embrace this clean core philosophy, you have to understand that even if you do everything quote-unquote right by building a side-by-side extension on SABTP, it can still turn into massive technical debt if you don't document it. Clean core absolutely requires recording the specific rationale and the exact lifespan of any extension. It's all about knowing why you built it and exactly when you're going to turn it off.
I want to wrap up this explainer with a final, slightly provocative thought. Your legacy system will eventually die. It'll be replaced, upgraded, or just shut down. But will the reasoning behind your architecture survive? If you can answer yes to that question, you are well on your way to a sustainable, future-proof ERP design. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I hope it really helps you build cleaner, smarter systems going forward.